Let's install VirtualBox on a Windows machine. It's a Windows 11 and 64-bit. So we go to the VirtualBox website. We find that we can download VirtualBox 7. So let's open that in a second window. And because we are using Windows, we are downloading the Windows host software. And you can see that it's downloading here. So I've downloaded it before already, so we can stop this and actually go directly to installing the VirtualBox. So let's double click on this. And you should be able to see the installation screen. So we click next. We want to have VirtualBox application, VirtualBox USB support. I think all of those things should be included. So we're going to click next. This is the location where it gets installed. Program files or /oracle/VirtualBox. We leave that default. Click next. So the first thing we notice is that we are missing some dependencies, the Win32 API. So we're going to have to install that. And the installation will take some time, so we're going to stop this here and continue later. Okay, so actually I wasn't able to stop it, but it finished in time, so we do not have to worry about it. So now we have the virtual machine sitting here, and there is nothing in it yet, so we have to add something. So we're going to go to machine and then add, and I don't think we want to get the VirtualBox VM. We want to fill our VirtualBox VM, so we go to machine and then add new to make a new machine. Okay, so this will be Ubuntu 22, and we will need an ISO image, so we need to go and actually download Ubuntu. So let's go to the Ubuntu desktop homepage. And then we scroll down here. See which place it is where we can actually get it, download Ubuntu. I think that's the right one. And then we go down here. So 22.04.3 is what we want to download. Now, if you go and take a look at the downloads, you will see that this is a pretty large file, 4.7 gigabytes. So this is going to take some time to download. So we're going to stop things here and restart again later. So now we have downloaded this this ISO image of the Ubuntu 22.04, and we're going to take this to the VirtualBox, select that in here. So we have to go to the downloads, and here is the whole thing. And then we click on next. Username VBox user, we can leave that for now. It can be changed later if it's necessary. And the password, you put in whatever you think would be a good password for Linux. In fact, coming to think of it, I probably will go back here and skip the unattended installation. I did that one time and it did actually not work very well. So let's skip that and then go here and do things actually a little differently. First of all, we want to use more base memory. It only assigns 2 megabytes here. We probably want to use at least about 8 megabytes. Okay, and then CPU, I have 24 CPUs, so I want to use at least 2 of them, perhaps even 4 for now. It's again a setting that can be changed again later, and I believe you actually have to assign the CPUs in pairs. I've been running into problems earlier when I had only 1 assigned instead of 2, for example. Okay, so now let's see next. We're going to create a virtual hard disk. I think 32 gigabytes is maybe a good number for that. And we are not pre-allocating the full size, we just let it grow as needed. And then we continue here. So now we have all those things set up, so I think we can finish. And then we have to somehow get it started, I guess. Let's try start. I don't think it knows yet about the ISO image that we downloaded. So this is probably not going to work. So let's stop that here for a minute and figure out what needs to be done. I think it actually did start looking at things here. So it shows me mouse integration and auto capture keyboard. Those are good things to have. We'll see now what it does. Okay, it actually does come up with Ubuntu. And at some point it should ask me whether I want to install Ubuntu. Here we go. So we don't want to do install Ubuntu. You can also try Ubuntu, but that not install it in your virtual machine. Okay, so let's do this. They'll ask a bunch of questions about the keyboard layout, so English, that sounds good. We continue on that. We do a normal installation, and we download updates while installing, and we also install third-party software. Then continue. Erase disk and install Ubuntu, that sounds good. Install now. So when it says erase disk, that's not going to be your regular hard drive, that's just going to be that virtual drive that we have for the VirtualBox machine. And it shows us what it's going to do, how it's going to initialize that virtual disk. And then the time zone, Denver, that is good. You put in your username and you choose a password. So I'm going to stop it here and fiddle with those things. So this is what it looks like right now. And we continue. And it is now copying files, so this may take a little bit. So I'm going to stop it again until it's finished, and then we'll continue. So now we are back. The installation took about 20 minutes or so, and it actually screwed up the sound. So I have to do a voiceover now to continue commenting on what I was doing here. So I'm restarting Ubuntu now. It's still on a fairly small screen because I have not put the guest additions yet into effect. That will come later. Okay, so now it's time to put in the password. To restarting, there are some default settings that I typically skip. Okay, no location services. And then we should be ready to go. Now we can open a terminal. What we do usually as a first thing is update the software. And to bring up the terminal, we can push Control-Alt-T. We can go to the application selector and then type terminal and start it that way. So now we have just a regular command line terminal in Ubuntu. So sudo apt update is to just download software that has changed since the downloaded file was made and our installation. It's all pretty small and hard to read because, again, we have not installed the guest additions yet. Okay, so it shows now the things that can be updated, and so we put in sudo apt upgrade to actually implement those updates. They take a little bit, usually. So we paused here in between, and now the updates are done. It was probably about 3 or so minutes for updating. And now we have to add a few things that are needed for the guest editions because it has to recompile some things. So we have to install 3 programs, the GCC, the make software, and Perl. So it's basically so that C code can be compiled. Okay, so now that is done. And now we have to go and find those guest editions. So we click there on the Insert Guest Edition CD. Sometimes that actually makes it start automatically, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. So we can find the guest editions. We can see that they are inserted or actually mounted down there. And there is probably one of those things that can be clicked to make it run, probably auto run or something like that. Just clicking on the autorun.sh is actually just bringing up the a listing of the source code, which is not going to help for actually running the whole thing. So we will go back to the terminal and actually enter the command manually. So it can be found under /media/username, and then I think it's VG something. So you find the names by actually hitting the tab button. That makes auto completion. So now we run the VirtualBox and I believe Linux editions. So that took a few minutes, so we paused in between and now we are back. And in order to actually make the guest editions effective, we have to close the virtual machine and then start it up again. And we're closing with powering off the machine, not saving the machine state. Okay, there's also something that we have to add in the settings. There is usually not enough memory reserved by default for the video, so it only shows 16 megabytes, and we will increase it to the full 120 megabytes so that we actually can resize the virtual machine later. We also increased the scale factor from 100% to 200%. That makes the things written on the screen easier to read. So it basically makes the characters larger. Okay, so now it's coming back up again with the auto capture of the keyboard and the mouse. And you can see that the screen is now larger of that virtual machine. We can actually now grab one of the corners and resize it, and it should continuously become larger and smaller. Oops, that didn't work, so we have to retype the password correctly. Okay, you can see now that the terminal writing is easier to read because we changed the default scaling to 200% rather than 100%. You also notice that there is 2 tabs now in the terminal window, and that is obtained by using Control-Shift-T to add a tab to it. What we were looking at here now, the nproc, that's the number of processors that is assigned, so it's indeed 4. And we were looking for the free memory. The command is actually free, not dfree. So that should probably come up again now. Okay, so you can see there on the first entry for the memory, there is 8 gigabytes of memory that we are using, or that we have available in the virtual machine. Let's check also the version of Ubuntu that we have, just to make sure that we indeed have 22.04.3. We're checking the home directory of that user, and you can see the different things similar to a Windows machine. You have a desktop, documents, downloads, and so forth. Okay, so now we're checking on the USB settings. The USB port can be passed through to the virtual machine. It is currently grayed out, the USB settings, because the virtual machine is running, and we cannot actually change those things while the machine is running. To change to USB 3, which we want to do, you have to power off the machine and then change it and then power it on again. Okay, now we're looking at shared folders. It's possible to share folders between the host and the guest machine, so in this case between the Windows and the Linux machine. We will have to set that up and make a folder on the Windows machine and another one on the Linux machine that's dedicated for that purpose. So we'll do that a little later. thing we want to do is we want to share the clipboard, and we want to enable drag and drop between the host and the guest, and we want to do that bidirectional so that it goes both ways, from the Windows to the Linux machine and from the Linux machine back to the Windows machine. Okay, so I'm creating now shared folder on the Windows machine. I create it under users and then the username like that, and then we make a new folder. Shared VBox. And then on the other side, now in the guest machine, in the Linux machine, we have to enter that path, the path to that folder that we just created. Okay, so here we see what's on the Windows machine, and there is the shared VBox. Then we have to enter the mount point for the Linux machine, and we put it into our home directory and call it shared VBox as well. So we allow both reading and writing, and then we select make permanent. So now we restarted the machine again, and we're trying to find whether that shared VBox is there. Oh, actually we did not restart yet. We have to actually add the current user to the group of VBox users so that we can actually use that shared folder that we created. Okay, so the groups command is to show what the current user, which groups it belongs to. So you can see that there is no VBox user yet, so we have to add that with the sudo user mod, and then the VBox SF. Okay, and we're trying to see if it's there, but we need to log out and then log back in before this actually takes effect. So now we're going to restart the machine. And before we do so, we will look at the settings of the USB port. Okay, so there are the settings, and now we can go to USB, and now you see that it's not grayed out anymore because the virtual machine is not running, so we can actually change some of those settings. So we select the USB 3 controller to have the speed available of that one for the devices that we'll use. To actually add a device, we have to go there to the right and click the plus to add one, and then a filter is created so that the virtual machine knows which USB devices to connect to. Okay, so now we're starting the virtual machine again. So we see the USB settings have taken effect. It's grayed out again now because we are running the machine, but we are now on USB 3.0. And you can see that the VBox SF is now actually there among the groups that this user is associated with. So now we're trying to see whether that shared VBox folder is available, but it is not, because we actually omitted something when we set it up. We did not select the auto mount. So it's actually not mounted. It exists, but it's not mounted. And I did forget what the command was for mounting something in Ubuntu. Okay, here's another attempt to try to connect to this, but again it's not mounted, so we cannot really get to it without knowing the mount command. So now we go into that sharing and we edit the sharing mode, and we click on the auto mount, and so next time we start the VirtualBox, it should actually mount it at the time when we start Ubuntu. Okay, so logging out. And again, when we log out, we should just power off the machine and not save the machine state. Now we're finding a test image that we can, we actually restart the machine, and then while it is restarting, we try to find a test image that we will load in the shared VBox folder on the Windows side, and then we will open it on the Linux side and check that we actually get to see the same picture. So there's Albert Einstein. We're saving that image. Okay, and we go and find the shared VBox folder. It's actually not under documents, it's under users, and then the username, and then the shared VBox. So there it is, and we drop the picture in there. And then we go back to our virtual machine. Okay, and so now we open the terminal, we take a look at the folders that we have, and sure enough, the shared VBox folder is now appearing. So we can list what's in there, and we can see the Einstein JPEG. We can use the file cabinet icon and go into the shared VBox, and we can then double click on the Einstein picture, and that should actually bring it up. Okay, so there we are. We successfully implemented our virtual machine here.